What's up everyone, Patrick here with another assembly video for you guys. This is for the MicroRunner R twin I-beam kit. This body, the chassis, the back half might be familiar to you guys from the MicroRunner R IFS kit. This is of course featuring this all new suspension setup for the front. As far as this video goes, we'll be kind of going over what's included in the full kit and then going over the assembly. I'll be starting with the assembly of just the beams. So if you got just the beam kit for my pre-runner chassis, stay tuned and that's what we'll be doing first. So as far as what's included in the kit, pen over here, you have your 4-piece body, cab, hood, fenders. This is going to be your front bumper assembly. Here's the beams, servo mount, inner fenders, radius arms, sway bar mount, knuckles. Here's your swing set and tie rod assembly. And then as far as the chassis rails go, you've got a skid, sliders. These are mag mounts for the body, trailing arms, and your spare tire carrier. All of the complete kits will come with a screw box like this. And if you get just the beams, you'll get baggies where the screws are all individually labeled so that there's no confusion. And again, for both the beam kit and the full MicroRunner kit, you'll get all the bushings and all the hardware that's needed to complete it. So just a couple little things before we get into the build process. Some things that I've tried to do to make everything easier for you guys is I have some different motor mount options. One of them is not pictured. I have a 17mm mount as well. This is the 16mm mount and the 12mm mount. So these will just fit a wider variety of motors. These are all forward facing. So you'll see I run the printed mounts in all of mine. It's tucked right in there. And that keeps the motor nice and forward, gives you space to put the battery in the back, and that's the layout that I like. In addition to that, I have my MicroRunner wheels available as a set of 6. These are 3D printed wheels, hardware is optional, and then the all-new Sunbeam wheel. So these are also a set of 6 sold on my Etsy. You'll see it's kind of a retro design is what I'd call it. It's all original, so yeah, just something different. And then I have 3 sizes of inserts available as well. You'll see that there's kind of a groove on the inside that locks onto the wheel. And then you have those vent holes that line up with these grooves in the insert. So everything works seamlessly together. You don't need to cut your tires or anything. Just mount them and you're ready to go. And then of course these paddle tires, these are fully functional. I actually use them more than regular tires on the back. I love the traction that they give, and they help it slide a little bit easier. So those things are available on my Etsy. And lastly is just the trailing arms. So all kits will come with trailing arms for SCX24 rear axles. I'd recommend a Tiny Terrains or a Muse SCX24 axle. And then I also have optional trailing arms and upper links for a TRX4M axle. These will fit the bigger bushings, but you will need to provide your own bushings and your own hardware for these. So they are available for $5 on my Etsy if you want them. It's just what comes in the kit is going to be a little bit more comprehensive. I guess the last thing before we move on is I wanted to mention the Google Doc that I have with all of like my parts recommendations. So that's going to be electronics, motor, battery, tires, suspension, really every part that you can think of, I've tried to address so that you guys can just go through that list, choose what you want. There's hyperlinks for everything, so just add it to your cart, and yeah, just to try and make the process a bit easier. This is how I've got mine set up. Of course, running SWD-RC sway bars, front and rear. For the beams, sway bars on the front will be optional. It's easy to run them with or without. So yeah, just a feature that I wanted to highlight quick. But yeah, without any further ado, let's get started on the assembly process, and we'll get started with the beams if you're just here for that. And quickly before we get into this, I'm using this electric driver for most stuff. You'll really need an M1.3 bit or 1.3 millimeter bit, and then a 2 millimeter bit. The 2 millimeter bit is just for the spare tire carrier. But yeah, you will need that to use those screws and switch out your spare tires if you want to do that. You can also use a regular handheld driver, and then just some needle nose pliers for the M1.4 nuts. So as we start on the beams, all of the kits, both just beams and full MicroRunner kits, will come with these spare parts. It's an extra set of swingers and an extra set of tie rods. If you guys need any spare parts, just reach out to me. I deal with it on a case-by-case basis, just so I can keep track of what's breaking, what needs improvements, stuff like that. But for all replacement parts, whether it's from a crash or heat warping or anything like that, just reach out to me and we'll get you all set up. So as we get started with our bushings here, just a couple things to be aware of. Most of these interfaces will be kind of a press fit the first time. This is by design so that you don't end up with a bunch of slop after the first few batteries. That also means that after the first few drives, it'll all start to loosen up and really work the way it's supposed to. It'll be a little bit stiff in the beginning, but again, that is intentional. All of these bushings have one face that's a little bigger and one face that's a little smaller. The face that's a little smaller is actually easier to thread the screw in from that side. So I'm going to go ahead and install all my bushings and then show you the orientation that I've installed them in. It's no big deal if you don't do that perfectly, but it just makes the whole process a bit easier. So now I've got my bushings installed. For my I-beams, I have the little side of the bushing facing forward, just because the screw's gonna go in from that way. So that makes that a little easier. These are your tie rods. So you'll notice one side is a little smoother. One side's got kind of this raised part to it. So the smoothness is going to be facing forward, meaning that your tie rods go like this. So the way I've oriented these bushings, and again, this isn't like the biggest deal, but it's just a little easier to thread the screw in. It'll be going in from the front here and then down through the knuckle here. So that's the way I've oriented those. The radius arms, not that big of a difference, but I have the small side facing this side with, the pattern to it. And then finally your little steering links. Again, these are going to have like a smooth flat side. And that's where I have the big side of the bushings. So the little side is facing upwards. You'll see that's the shape of these links. And that's it for the beams. As far as the trailing arms go, you'll see for the SCX24 axle, they'll mount like this. So I just don't want these links to slip off of the ball bushing. So I've got the big face on the outside there. The same goes for the rear uppers, since they'll have screws going this way and then that way. I've just got the big end of the ball bushing so that the link can't pop off. And then we'll start with assembling the steering for the beams as well as the bumper. Getting the bumper assembled is pretty simple. These little pieces are actually made in nylon, which gives them, just a little bit of flex. They can flex repeatedly many times. This is the only part that comes with the kit made in nylon. I do make nylon parts to order, but it's the only part that I felt really needed to be in this nylon blend. So I'm just going to run two 5.5mm screws through these two holes here. Sorry, so 4 in total, 2 on each side. So just a quick note as I'm putting these screws in, for all these printed parts, it is relatively, easy to strip them, especially with an electric driver. So I'm just tightening them almost all the way and then getting them snug by hand. And you'll feel it. It, definitely gets snug. If you push through that, you'll strip it. So yeah, just something to be aware of. So for the swing set, these steering pieces here, you'll have duplicates of all of these, like I said, in the spare parts baggie, but these two pieces are going to be your back halves. And then you'll notice that these indents will be facing upwards and inwards. I'm going to be using 3 15mm screws as well as 3 8mm screws. And I've tried to make most of these tolerances so that everything kind of slides or threads into place. But since it's with a 3D printer, there might be, some minor differences. So wherever needed, just thread it in with the screwdriver. And I'll start with the 2 15s, just putting these swingers together. Once you've gotten to this point, we can start installing the little connecting links. So again, these are my 15mm screws through the top, and then I'll be using 8mm screws for the other links. So through this hole there, you'll see that this has a bit of a raise there, so you won't need a screw there yet. And then this side will also take 2 8mm screws. So at this point, I've got 3 of my 8mm screws in. You'll see the heads are flush and there's nothing poking out on the back, except for, of course, these ones up top. So at this point, just some things to look out for. Again, this smooth part of the tie rod is going to be facing forward, and this little raised part is going to be facing backwards. And then I've got this little link left over, so you'll see of these two links, they look kind of similar, but this longer one is going to be the connector. It's a little bit thinner as well. And then on this, oh, it's hard to show it now, but this link has a bit of an indent there, and I want that facing downwards. That way when it steers, you get a little bit of extra clearance there. And again, these will loosen up a little bit as you start driving. If you feel that this is too snug, just back these screws off a quarter turn and that'll loosen right up. The last screw that we have for this is going to be a 15mm screw. It will go through this link here. This is what's going to be attached to the servo. And then it'll thread through this hole in the swinger, through this other tie rod, and then it'll all be together. So you'll see with that last 15mm screw installed, everything is nice and flush on the back side. We can see the screws. And yeah, we can set that aside for now and start on the beams and the radius arms. So just a couple things as we get started on the rest of the beams. From here on out, I'll kind of be referring to the passenger side and the driver's side. This will be the driver's side. This will be the passenger side. I know I have some customers in the UK, so I apologize if this makes it more confusing. Just the best way I know kind of how to explain everything. I mentioned this earlier, but I'm running SWD sway bars. I would highly recommend the rear. I do like running a front one as well, but that's more optional. So kind of the sway bar mount in here, this Y-shaped piece is easy to, it's easy to run it without. And then depending on whether or not you're using the sway bar, you may or may not need these, and you'll be using different size hardware if you do need these. This next step is dependent on if you do want to run the sway bar. So if you do want to run the sway bar, these links, you'll notice they have a taper this way. This is where that notch is. And I want that taper facing backwards as such. For both sides, you'll kind of have a more squared off end that faces outwards. So that's the driver's side. The passenger side looks a little different, but again, this kind of squared end is going to be facing outwards. If you want to run the sway links, you're going to use a 10mm screw for the driver's side and a 15mm screw for the passenger side. If you do not want to run the sway bar links, use an 8mm screw for this side and a 5.5mm screw for this side. Now that we have our sway links mounted, this is going to be your driver's side and the passenger side. So you see the passenger side actually has a little more space there. Now we can start with the knuckles. So you'll want to use 4 5mm screws for the knuckles, one on the top and bottom on each side. These beams have a little bit of caster to them, so just keep in mind that when the hub is actually on, it'll kind of seem a little tilted back. You'll see that angle there in the beam. So if you try and just press it on straight and screw the screws in, it'll be a little bit tricky. It kind of finds its home. It finds its home at a bit of an angle there. I'm just gently making sure that the screw finds its thread, and then I'll get it snug and kind of back it off a little bit. Again, the screw head is going to be flush there, and I want smooth movement. There's going to be a little bit of resistance, but like I said earlier, that'll go away with a few drives. And I almost forgot, your knuckles are going to be asymmetrical as well. So the passenger side just has like those 2 cutouts aside from the bearing, while the driver's side will have those 3 cutouts. And just keep in mind that like this flat spot should be facing upwards, so that kind of helps to make it a little easier as well. A big reason for this is that the bearings are offset from each other, just a little bit, but that helps keep the wheelbase almost identical on each side. There's about 1 millimeter difference, but unlike real 1-to-1s and like the 10 scale I-beam kits that end up staggering the front wheels, this helps to keep them more in line. That'll just give you more options for bodies, tires, etc. And now we have our driver's side knuckle on as well. So again, just to show you guys, driver's side and the passenger side. And from here, we'll move on to our servo/beam mount. This really holds everything together, and it has this diagonal brace since these are going to be a little offset. So for the brace, the flat side, the smooth side is going to be facing down, the textured side is going to be facing up. And then looking from the back, this is going to be your passenger side, right, and your driver's side. So the passenger side has a bigger indent. And you'll see that that diagonal brace makes sure that the servo mounts line up straight, but the actual beam mounts are offset. I'm going to use 4 8mm screws, 2 on each side. They pass through there. I've tried to make these holes big enough to like accept all the different bits that I have. But if you're like completely unable to get your bit in there, if you're using something totally different from what I have, it's okay to make a bit of a modification to this. There's a lot of material here on purpose. But yeah, and with our 4 8mm screws installed, it's tough to see them, but they're tucked in there. This is a very, very solid connection. This is going to add a lot of strength to the whole suspension setup. Yeah, from here, we can go ahead and kind of, you'll see that these just slide into place. And we'll use 2 10mm screws going through the front to the back, one on each side for each of the beams. And this is what it should look like at this point. So mostly assembled. We've got this, we've got our steering assembly. Now's a good time to attach your radius arms. So if you're looking from the top down, you'll see that the passenger side is further forward. So that's what you're going to want to use your longer link for. It's a little bit longer, about 5mm. I'm going to orient it with, there's kind of an indent on the top there. So I'm going to have this facing upwards, and then kind of this side with, some more detail facing outwards. So those will slide into there. The other one goes here, of course. Same thing, you'll see that indent is facing upwards with the pattern on the side. And I'm going to use 2 10mm screws, one on each side, to attach those. And with those radius arms attached, we can go ahead and attach our swing set steering. So the last little baggie will be 4 of these bigger spacers and 4 of these tiny spacers. They almost look like the O-rings for the bushings, but that's why they're in their separate baggie. Basically, there's 2 that you need and 2 spares. These bigger ones are what I use for like my shock interface. Right now I've just got some metal ones on there, but these are perfect. They'll space your shock out just the right amount. And then the little ones, again, I'll just need 2. I include a bunch of extras because I know that if you drop these, they're as good as gone. But yeah, these 2 little spacers will just go on the back side of these screws here. Since this is going to be an area that pivots a lot, this is just a nice kind of precaution. If you miss these or you don't want to run them, that's fine. But yeah, that'll just help everything. And then as you're installing these, just make sure that the driver's side is going to be staggered backwards. Same goes for the beams. The driver's side is sitting behind the passenger side, so make sure that your steering links are oriented the same. These 15mm screws will thread into, let's see if it'll focus, these top holes there and there, right? And these will be your servo mounting options. So I'll just go ahead and attach those, and then we'll move on to connecting the knuckles. Same goes for these, where you can tighten them down and back them off a quarter turn just to keep everything moving nice and smoothly. And then again, making sure that, these are all kind of parallel with each other. I'm going to go ahead and use, oh, that's a bit of a snug fit. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and use 2 10mm screws again, one on each side, going through the top of the knuckle and down. So at this point, this is what your twin beams should be looking like. This step is pretty much the same if you have just the pre-runner chassis, not a MicroRunner kit. It's just your skid plate looks a little different. It'll be kind of this side on both sides. But regardless, these radius arms will just go in there. Make sure you attach these before you attach the skid to the chassis. And I'll be using 10mm screws for these as well. And with your skid plate attached, this is what it should be looking like. If you've come for just the beams, this is about it for the assembly video. At this point, you'll need to install the bearings, as well as your axle stubs. So this is just a stock front axle stub, kind of with that cup shaved away, and I left a little bit of material here for it to bite onto the bearing. But yeah, that'll just slip into place, and then you'll run your pin and hex on the outside as normal. This is really the only piece that needs to be modified to get everything to work. You can use a hacksaw or a Dremel or a file or whatever, just to remove that, you know, there's like a 1/4 inch of material there. And yeah, like I said, if you were just here for the bumper, at this point, this will slide over the chassis. You'll see how that interface works. There's 3 holes in the chassis, so you just have those 3 to line up. And then using 8mm screws, 2 is enough on each side, using like the front hole and the rear hole. Just thread those in through the bumper, through the chassis rail, and into the servo mount. And then you'll be able to mount your servo. The beam kits come with these inner fenders as well. Very easy to mount. You'll have some little short 3.6mm screws. And then I just thread my mag mounts into these on the back. And then lastly, if you're just doing the beams and you want to run a sway bar, this little Y-shaped piece will line up with the lower 3 upper link mounts on the chassis, if that makes sense. So yeah, of those 9 holes there, the bottom 3. And if you do that on each side, you'll see how it kind of tucks right in there, it clears the motor on top, clears everything down below, and that allows you to run a sway bar. For those here for the full MicroRunner R kit, we'll just keep moving along here. Now with the beams done, that was really the trickiest part, so it'll be pretty smooth sailing from here. So moving on to the full MicroRunner R kit, I'm going to take my sliders, and I'm going to be using 4 8mm screws to start for this forward hole and the rearmost hole. We're going to leave this middle slot open for the time being. And I'll show you guys how it all looks when it's bolted together, but really you're looking for this back shape to kind of match up across all 3 parts. So your skid plate, your sliders, and your chassis will all be flush back there. And that's just a good way to line up the screws in the holes. And again, 2 8mm screws all the way in the back, all the way in the front, and repeat the same on the other side. With the sliders and the skid plate attached, everything's gonna be a little wonky, right? Because the beams have sweep, which means that they're angled backwards. So there's always like a little bit of tension in there. So yeah, as you attach your front bumper, you're gonna be using I'll just be using 4 8mm screws. Just keep in mind that you might need to kind of hold everything in line as you tighten it down. And yeah, that's normal that it's kind of pulling a little bit. So just something to be aware of. And with our front bumper installed, if you do want to run a sway bar, now's a good time to attach this mount. So I'll just line it up in here, and then I'll be using 4 5.5mm screws. And I'm going to mount it in this bottom row of holes there. And here you can see how that sway bar mount installs. So still gives you plenty of space for electronics and all that. And again, I've just tried to make this so that it's, just as clean with or without it installed. Moving on to our inner fenders, You'll have a left and a right. Now's a good time to install your shocks if you have them on hand, just because that'll allow you to line everything up right. You'll see that I've got this passenger side shock mounted all the way forward. The driver's side shock is mounted one hole back. So I've also staggered my mag mounts, but you don't have to do that. But yeah, if you do want to run these mag mounts, use a 5.5mm screw through the mag mount, through the chassis, and then either into the back of the fender here, or if for any reason you want to use some of the M1.4 nuts, you can also mount it up higher. But yeah, I'll use 5.5mm screws and then a little short 3.6mm screw back here just for some extra strength. And now I have my inner fenders and mag mounts attached. Again, the 5.5mm screws up here and the little 3.6mm screws down here. And as always, you don't want any screws poking through. Everything should be nice and flush. And from here, we can kind of move on to completing the back half of this kit. The first thing that I want to do for the back half is actually going to be the rear upper links. Once we install the battery tray, you can definitely still access them, but it is a good bit trickier. So these are the links for the SCX24 axle. This middle hole, like the middle, is going to be a great starting point. If you raise your link upwards, you'll get a little more anti-squat, so under acceleration it won't want to squat down quite as much. And similarly, I don't know how to say it, but if you mount it in that bottom hole under acceleration, it will squat a little bit more and absorb some more bumps. So just something that, allows you to tweak that and tune it. Again, that middle point's a great starting position, or that middle upper hole. And I'll use an 8mm screw for that with one of these little nuts on the end. And just keep in mind that for these nuts, it's a great idea to use some Loctite. I'll just use some blue Loctite for them. But any Loctite or glue or anything is better. If you just mount these as is, they'll probably rattle off the first run. And with the rear links installed, I've just got that little nut with a bit of Loctite on the inside. We can go ahead and install our lowers. These uppers, regardless of if you're getting them for the TRX or the Traxxas rear axle, just make sure that this bend is facing downwards, and that'll give you the most up travel while still not running into that battery. So that is why they're designed that way. From here, we can move on to the trailing arms. For the SCX24 trailing arms, you're gonna run them like this. For the TRX 4M trailing arms, you're gonna run them like this. This will help to keep them in a straight line, parallel with each other, which won't cause any shock binding or sway bar binding or anything like that. These just kind of slide into place here, and then I'm going to use 12mm screws and run them through this last empty hole on each side. With that, your trailing arms and rear upper links will be attached. Now's a good time to move on to the battery tray. You'll see the battery tray has a few different mounting options, but I'm just going to try and mount it as far back as possible. I'll be using 4 5.5mm screws for this. And here's our battery tray installed. So moving on to the spare tire carrier, you're going to use, so this piece here will have my logo like facing forward, so it's not visible from the back. And then it's just pretty easy to line up this back face there. So I'm going to use 4 5mm screws in these holes there to attach this. And then I'm going to use 8mm screws out here on the sides for my mag mounts, right? And this little cutout for the magnet will be facing outwards. And then for these pieces here, I'll show it all when it's completed, but they just slot in as such. I was having a hard time focusing. There we go. And I'll be using 8mm screws for this connection as well. And here's our spare tire carrier assembled. Again, 8mm screws here on the outsides, and here with the 5mm screws, the 4 5mm screws here in the middle. You can do this later or now, but this is where these M2.5 screws thread in, and those will just hold your spare tires in place. I won't do that for now, but if we keep on moving here, you'll notice that there's some notches on the outsides of these connectors here, and those, let's see here, everything kind of notches into place. So once you've got it to this point, you might need to use some pressure, just push it on, but you'll see everything becomes nice and flush. And with the battery tray all the way back, you'll see it kind of butts up super close to these connectors here. And then I'll just go and use 4 5mm screws. I'll be doing this hole and this hole, not that middle one. You can if you want, but it's not necessary. And these are a nice solid connection. Make sure you don't strip it. There we go. And sometimes you'll see like a little bit of plastic kind of spits out from the backside. That's easy to brush away and clean up. I'll do that on the other side, and I think we will move on to the body. And here's our kit just about assembled. I've already shown you guys kind of what's going on with the front, but this is how I've got my sway bar connected. You'll see it goes on the outside of that Y shape, and then these little downlinks that I said are optional will tie into the inside of the sway bar there. And again, I'm just using those little nuts and screws. If you order the sway bars from SWDRC, he'll send you all the hardware that you need to complete them as well. And then here's the rear. I've got mine set up in the trailing arm, or on the trailing arm, and then it's just using these bigger holes back here on the chassis. You'll have a few different options for where you want to run that sway bar through. In all of the kits, you'll get these little 2 chassis braces. If you want, you can put one up here, but yeah, I just include 2. You can use them as you want. You'll have your spare parts left over, a couple of bushings and some O-rings left over, and then we have the body. So as you guys know, or as you guys may know, I work with 2Scale RC on Instagram to design all of the bodies. So I also have the trophy truck style body. Of course, this high beam kit is more meant for this MicroRunner R body that we have. So yeah, it'll be 6 pieces technically. These 2 pieces will come included with the kit. They sit in here, just making the connection more solid and giving you another place to put a magnet. So for these here, you'll see one side has a bigger kind of a hex-shaped hole, and one side is just for the screw to thread into. So using the little nuts that come with the kit, you can press these in. Some of you might be able to press them in by hand. I like to just kind of line them up with the hole, and then using my needle nose, it's pretty easy to just press them in. And you can press them in all the way using a driver or just the pliers. But yeah, this will give you a super solid connection. Once I'm done with this, I will show you what screws you need to use to attach everything together. For the rear fenders, you'll obviously have a left and a right. Let's see. So I'll use 10mm screws through the back side of the fender, through the cab, and then into the back side of the mag mount, which will then thread into the nut there. For the mag mounts, basically this curved shape is going to line up with the inside of the body. So that's how you'll know your left and your right. And yeah, 4 10mm screws to attach the rear fenders to the cab. And there's our rear fenders attached. You can use like 8mm screws for here. I just find that it is like significantly easier with the 10s, just getting it to thread through everything. And then finally, for the cab and the hood, just use 4 8mm screws. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can thread them in from either side, but I prefer to thread them in from the back into the front here. That way they're just not visible. It makes it a little more flush here in case you ever have the tire hitting. And there we have it, the MicroRunner R twin I-beam kit all assembled. If you don't use these chassis braces, you'll have them left over, like we talked about earlier, the baggie of spare parts, some bushings, a couple bits of hardware left over, and yeah. At this point, I do have that Google Doc. You guys can go through, choose all the parts that you need. I have different options for suspension, motors, electronics, wheels, tires, etc., etc. This is, definitely an in-depth kit, but the whole goal behind the MicroRunner series was to make these fast micros easier to build for everyone, and yeah. I think that is everything that I wanted to touch on. Again, please reach out to me if you guys have any questions. And yeah, super excited for this. We've been getting a bunch of snow here in Colorado, so that's why there haven't been that many videos out lately. But now that this assembly video is done, I'll be building myself a fresh one, just transferring over all my electronics and suspension and stuff from this one. But yeah, stay tuned. I'm very excited for kind of this continuation and evolution of the MicroRunner line. We've got different bodies, different suspension systems, different wheelbases. Everything is on the same chassis, so it's nice and modular. If you ever want to switch between bodies or trailing arms or between the IFS and the beams, for the front suspension, all of that's possible. So yeah, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. These assembly videos definitely aren't my favorite thing to do, but I know that they're incredibly helpful for you guys, so I'm happy to do it. As always, reach out to me if you guys have any questions, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much for watching.